The man is multi-talented here.
You are.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. And compared to most of you in here, I have not been with the High Plains Riders for very long, I would say. Most of you have been here longer than I have. But for those of you who do not know me, and I know we have some new faces, guests, and new members. My name is Ricky Treon, although I usually go by Ricky. I am the fourth of my name, and I was pretty much left with Ricky or Rich, and none of us liked Rich, apparently, whenever I was a kid. So Ricky it is. But I am... I've been a writer, it seems like, my whole life, and I'm sure most of you feel that way. I started out in journalism. I was one of the last managing editors for the Amarillo News. Whenever it got bought out, I was there. So I had a career in journalism, and then I figured out that making up facts was way more fun than trying to report them accurately. So I moved into fiction. I have 4 novels out, 2 small presses, this year, I decided I was going to focus on Hollywood and see what might be out there for me, because most folks who publish a few novels, they start talking with other folks who publish a few novels, and everybody wants to know if they can make any additional money in Hollywood, because there's a lot more money in that industry, which sometimes you don't find out until you get into writing books and realize that there's almost no money in it. So, I'll be honest. That's one of the reasons why I decided I wanted to give that a shot. But I have a manager for my literary endeavors in Hollywood, and I have not had a literary agent, a book agent, in a while. So it's exciting to have representation again, and I'll talk more about that. And if you're wondering why I look like an extra from an old cowboy movie, it is because I am about to be not an extra, but a bit player in a Western. So the mustache and the goatee are in fact being grown out for an appearance on film, because Hollywood's all about networking, and I networked with the director and said, if you need somebody to, move heavy stuff around or hold a boom mic or whatever, I'll do it. And, I have some experience on camera in non-scripted stuff, promoting my books and going live on social media and stuff. And he decided that I had a look, and I'm really loud, as you can tell right now, because I'm not even raising my voice. I would blow out your eardrums if I decided to be loud. So I project well. And so anyway, I had qualities. He cast me in the movie. So I am going to be an actor. I'm a represented screenwriter, and also a novelist. So hopefully I have some insights into some stuff that you all will find interesting. And as a board member of the High Plains Riders, we've been trying to expand and get some more diverse information out to people, because in my opinion, we've had a whole lot of stuff that went over the same types of writing and the same storytelling stuff. So hopefully, even if you're not interested in screenwriting, this will at least be a little informative and a brief respite from being told about all the same storytelling stuff. Because my presentation is not, I'm not going to tell you how to write a story, because storytelling is essentially the same whether you're writing from the screen, whether you're writing prose, whether you're writing short fiction, novel-length fiction, and really even if you're writing nonfiction, if you want to tell a narrative type story. Most of that stuff's the same, and most of it you probably already know. But screenwriting looks different, it feels different, and there are different rules and different customs. And so hopefully I can translate from folks who write books into what I've learned about trying to write screenplays, and also how very different the business side of it is, because most of us know the steps to finding a literary agent and to getting a book published. Some of us, publish ourselves or independently published, and small presses and major presses all kind of work about the same. Hollywood works very differently. In fact, as you'll see in one of my slides, they're almost mirror images of each other in many respects. So I will go over that, and I know that I'm better with Q&A than I normally am with the presentation, so I'll try to make sure after the break we leave a lot of room for that, so you can ask your individual questions. And I do want to start off with one caveat. Obviously, I'm giving this presentation during the middle of an historic double strike in the Hollywood industry. The writers have been on strike for more than 70 days, and the actors just went on strike. So I will, we can discuss that more during the Q&A, but I'll say a couple of things. One, I'm not a member of those guilds, so I am not directly impacted, but I know a lot of people who are, so I can relay some of what I know about that. And also, I will be shooting a film, as I just said, and I am working on screenplays, but I am adhering to all of the rules. I am, in solidarity with those folks that are striking. Fortunately for me, I have not broken into the business far enough for anything I'm currently working on to have to be put on hold or anything. And the film I'm in is ultra low budget and is non-union, so matter of fact, SAG is telling their people if you can find work in the small movies, go ahead and do it. And we've had some people who are a member of SAG-AFTRA asked to come aboard our film because it is filming and it is non-union, it is micro budget, which the strike is aimed at impacting the major corporations, Universal, Sony, Warner Brothers, those people. They are not aimed at independent filmmakers, which is what my film is. So I wanted to make sure to get that out of the way. We can discuss more of that stuff later. So I wrote the presentation, and I didn't include anything I think might change as a result if the strike is successful, and really most of the fundamentals from a writer's perspective probably won't change. Hopefully all it changes is they make more money and have to do less work, which is what I think most strikes are about anyway. So with that, I will get started. I did not come up with an extremely great title for this, but essentially I'm just going to try to break down what a screenplay is and how it relates to writing prose and the differences and similarities in the business of books versus the business of show. So let's see if I can work the technology. Katie was great. Screenplay formatting is the first thing because I know that when I first wanted to start writing screenplays, I asked some folks for some literature on how to literally write, what some of this stuff meant. And the initial feedback I got from folks who do it for a living is the software does it for you. I'm like, well, that's unhelpful. And this was before artificial intelligence could literally do that stuff for you. This was, a couple of years ago when I first started asking. So I heard that a few times, and then finally I asked a good friend of the organization, Taylor Moore, what do people mean when they say that? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And he said that if you get Final Draft or Fade In, which are two of the most popular ones, it really, it only allows you to do the certain things, and Final Draft, you don't even have to hit the shift key to capitalize. If you hit a period, the next thing you type is going to automatically capitalize. It's really developed for writing quickly. But there are, you can Google and find, how to format a screenplay, and it will give you the steps. So this is Courier New Font, which is what scripts are written in because it looks like an old school typewriter, and they just have kept that as a tradition. If you read a screenplay that is not done in that format, it's probably being done independently and outside of the studio system or by those who are trying to sell to quote Hollywood. But a screenplay, which most people will call a script, looks very different than a book, not only in terms of font but in terms of layout. You can see I have a scene header at the top there for fun, and I'll explain what that is. But I do, as we get further into this, keep in mind that the effect on the reader should be the same. There are people who read scripts professionally, executives, and also people who that's all they do all day, and they provide coverage, and I'll explain what that is later. But you are writing for it to be produced into a film, and that's the final published version of a screenplay. But there are a lot of people who read screenplays for a living, and so you are, if you're writing on spec, you are essentially trying to have the same effect on them as you do when you write a book and you're doing it for people who are going to buy your book in a bookstore or on Amazon. And it really comes down to just learning what the different elements of a script and how you use those to convey the same information that you do in prose. You just do it much more quickly. And there's a very specific format to a script. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about storytelling. I'm talking about, literally what the elements are. I'll get into that in a minute. And you're writing something that's going to be translated into the screen. So what you're writing is a blueprint for a movie or a blueprint for an episode of television. And when I say that these things don't get published, it is because they get changed as people are filming. You hear about actors improving their own dialogue and stuff like that. I'm about to find out just how often maybe that happens whenever I finally get on a set and am on camera myself, because I'm sure I will be close to off book, but I'm not sure if I'll have everything memorized exactly how the director wants it. But many directors want their actors to feel in the moment, and if they change a word or two, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But that's why what you're doing as the writer is you're giving a blueprint. You are not being as precious with your words at all as you are whenever you're writing your book. And as I said, the great news is that the screen writing software, really does it for you. Half the time if you hit enter, it goes to the next thing you should be writing, and you don't even have to worry about whether or not you're at the next building block. It pretty much knows what you're trying to do. It's very intuitive. It is not ChatGPT, but it is definitely much more intuitive than Word, I'll put it that way. And I'm talking about Final Draft. So this is essentially everything that is in a screenplay. You just put them in different order sometimes, but really it's mostly in this exact order, and you use most of these things except for the parenthetical. So the scene heading, INT is interior, the opposite is EXT exterior, and those are the only two you use. You're either inside of a conference room or you're outside on the street, and that's meant to convey something to the folks when they're shooting. And so you could be inside of a car, you could be interior. The one thing that may change is we've all seen films and TV shows where you show people in a cab and then you show them through the windshield or whatever. So you can put INT/EXT if you're doing something like that. But for right now, we'll just stick to either inside a building or outside of a building or car. Conference room, that's what this is. I don't have to say the Edward Davis room. If I want to convey that, I can do that later on. And it's day or night. You can put morning, you can put afternoon. If it's a shooting script, the director may put golden hour, which for those of you who are in photography know that's basically dusk. You can do that stuff, but if this program is designed for those of us who are writing a screenplay and trying to get it noticed by somebody and get it sold to somebody and get it made at the early stages, day or night is usually fine unless the hour matters, and even then you're better off putting that into the description of why it matters. So after that scene heading, you have lines of what they call action. So usually the first thing is you're describing visually what the room looks like. The diverse crowd sits in rows of chairs. And then next you're probably going to introduce a character. You can see that the character name is in caps. One thing that you'll learn is that there are a lot of ways to write a screenplay, and there are conventions you can break, and it's all about being clear and not being confusing, really. But the first time you introduce a character, for sure you want to capitalize, and most of the time, unless you have 30 people in a scene, you want to capitalize the names every time, because your actors in the end, and a lot of times your directors and the people who are reading, are going to be skimming and looking for where they are in the script. Like as an actor myself, I've learned that is very convenient. If I can just look for the capitalized and look for my name and figure out exactly what I'm doing. I read the whole script, but sometimes I just want to see, where I fit in. You can put the age in there. It doesn't always matter, and you can put it in parentheses, or you can just offset it by commas. I've seen it both ways, and nobody seems to really care, which is not the same as prose. There are definitely, if you just put a whole bunch of stuff in parentheses, usually the readers don't like that, but for readers who read scripts, they're used to seeing that. The diverse crowd watches me in weekend casual dress and hipster facial hair, which is what I'm calling what I have. He stands on a short dais with a slideshow presentation behind him. Obviously, I wrote this scene exactly how it was playing out in real life because I thought it would be funny. So those two lines are action, which is literally usually exactly, you're telling people exactly what they should be seeing and hearing in their brain. And then the next thing, now it looks like it's centered. It's not exactly centered, but like I said, if you're writing in a screenwriting software and you mark that as character, it knows exactly where to put that into. You don't have to worry about it, but you can probably look that up if you decide you want to write a screenplay in Word. But really, you can just hit the tab thing a couple times, make it look like it's in the center. And if you import it into screenwriting software, it will put it in the right way. It knows what a screenplay is supposed to look like. If it half-assed looks like the screenplay, the software, when you import it, will put it in the exact right form. Like I said, it's really pretty easy. That's why everyone said, the software does it for you, which if you've never used the software, does not make sense, but once you use the software, it does. So that's character name. Next thing below that is, they call it parenthetical because it is in parentheses. My recommendation is to use this sparingly. It's a little bit like, and I'm guilty of this whenever I write books, putting stuff off in end dashes, in the middle of a sentence. I like doing that because that's how I talk, because I ramble, as you can tell by listening to me for more than 2 minutes. But it can get annoying, and readers don't always like that if you're doing that every sentence. Same thing with dialogue. And plus, your director and your actors want freedom to read the lines how they want to read them and to express themselves that way. That is a big part of their art. You have your art and the writing. That's a big part of their art. But sometimes it is important for the story. Like in this case, I'm a loud guy, and I had a feeling I wouldn't have a microphone or that I wouldn't want to use a microphone because this is a small room. So I'm going to be speaking loudly. You can put whispers, and it's usually that parenthetical should directly relate to how the delivery of the following dialogue should be done. So if somebody is smiling, you see some writers who say, Rick, smiling and talking. Well, what you should actually do is right before I talk, go, Rick smiles, and then just deliver the dialogue. But if you do it the other way, it's not a big deal. But the more of those parentheticals you have, that is one pet peeve that a lot of people who read screenplays for a living don't like because that slows them down. And much like in a book, you are trying to get them to turn the pages quickly, which seems odd since they're not reading for it to be a page turner, but you want them still to read it as though it's a page turner, even if that isn't intuitive. So that's a parenthetical. And then your dialogue is your dialogue. It doesn't extend all the way out to the margins. It's more in the middle. And then after that, you follow it up, probably with more action. And these are the building blocks of the standard screenplay. Someone in the crowd yawns because I'm being boring and I'm trying to be funny. But those are all of the elements that are going to be in a spec screenplay for the writers. Now, if you find a screenplay online, it's going to have some other things. It's going to have transitions, fade in, jump to, that kind of stuff. You can learn how to use those, but since we are a group of writers, generally speaking, the directors are going to put that stuff in there, and they are going to want to do that. If you put too much of that in your screenplay, it's not a deal breaker. The internet will say, don't ever do it, or you'll never, ever get someone to buy your screenplay. Well, that's about as true as saying you should never, ever use alliteration in your novels. I mean, that's bogus. You just don't do it a lot. Same rule applies here. The director is going to want to do a lot of that stuff. And 90% of what you see in film and television is, consumers of that medium know, you've cut from one scene to another, and it's all pretty standard. And even on shooting scripts, like right below that would be another scene heading when you change the location, or you have to change significantly in time. You can put cut to over there on the right side and have a new scene. But if you just go scene and then scene heading without transitions, it's implied that you're just cutting from one to another, which is, like I said, that's 90% of it. So that's another thing you don't have to worry about as the writer. The director will put that into what they call a shooting script, which is what is delivered to location, which has some of that stuff in it. And the good news is that, as I said, if you Google how to format a screenplay, get all that information. But I decided to present, so I had to fill time with something. So I decided to spell it out for you. But in terms of what you're going to write, the content that is going to be in your screenplay, especially in the action, everything is visual and auditory because, as I said, this is a blueprint for what people are filming, and those are the two senses that you use. You see things, you hear things. You don't smell things. You don't taste things. If somebody eats something bitter, you don't say, Ricky eats something bitter. You say Ricky sticks out his tongue and scrunches his nose. And that's how you show that it's sour. It's really a very extreme version of show, don't tell. And I know we all know what that is, and we're all sick of hearing it. But this is a very extreme version of that. There is no inner dialogue. I say that I read a script that's on what they call the Blacklist, which is supposed to be some of the best unproduced screenplays in Hollywood. And there was one, it was a sports one, so I read it, and it did have some internal dialogue. It was in italics, just like you might do in prose. But it was funny, snappy inner dialogue, and you could still see how somebody might react to that. It is not what you're supposed to do, but it's you can do it. I just don't recommend doing it a lot. But in general, there's no inner dialogue, so you show and you don't tell. Now, describing your scene and your setting, which is probably what I meant to say instead of your scene, your setting can help you here. Use that to reflect the inner life of your characters. If the person has a messy brain, if they're scatterbrained, then they should and probably would have a messy house, and their paintings might be askew, and there might be a stain on the carpet or whatever it is because they're not worried about those little details. I'm not saying that's me, but that's me. If the person is a very logical thinker and everything has to be so, what some people would call OCD, although that is a medical term, so I'm not going to, but like if they have that sort of mentality, then their living space is probably going to reflect that. And so you can use that because that's a very visual thing to express how the character's inner life works. And that is, kind of a tried and true filmmaking and television trick that you can use because the reader will see a messy house and they will get a sense that, everybody, the person responsible for that messy house is in fact inside. That's a reflection of them. Short sentences and paragraphs are paramount in a screenplay, and this is sort of an extreme version of what I do as a line editor, getting rid of anything that does not need to be there. You do not have to write complete sentences. If one or two words will get the point across, they recommend doing that rather than having all the prepositions and adverbs and all that stuff in there. Now, that being said, as long as you're not writing like William Faulkner, you should be okay if you want to write in incomplete sentences. But there will be times when you want to have a sentence or two in a paragraph and then follow that up with one word or a very short sentence, just the same as you would in prose. As I said, if you use the techniques that thriller writers use to write page turners, you're just doing that, like I said, just perhaps to a more extreme level. And there are definitely executives, people who will be reading screenplays who, if they see long paragraphs and not a lot of white space, they will just put it down because they know they're not going to read it as quickly as they want to because they have to read things much more quickly than somebody with a book. Somebody with a book might take, a couple days, a week, a month to get through a novel or a book-length work of fiction. People who read scripts for a living, they're trying to read 5 or 10 a day, and they should be able to read them in about the same amount of time as it takes to watch a movie or watch an episode of television. Which brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, or actually, I'll say it, I'll go over it again. A page of a screenplay is supposed to represent 1 minute of time on screen. So that's why, if somebody takes more than 2 hours to read a film script, then you probably have too many words in there because, it shouldn't take that long to read a page of a script. But I want to talk about act structures in screenplays because they are much more important than they are when you're writing your novel, because all of us novelists, or well, we won't go into nonfiction. It doesn't really apply because all of this is fiction. Even if it's a biopic, it is still fiction. Even if it's based on a true story, you're still fictionalizing it and dramatizing it. So there is no real nonfiction in writing screenplays. So you use fiction act structures. When you're writing a novel, a lot of times you should know it, but you don't have to adhere very strictly. And if you break the rules, as long as you do it intentionally, most readers don't care as long as it's written beautifully and they love the characters. That is not the case in a screenplay, especially if you are trying to sell it to someone or get the attention of somebody who can get it produced. They will count pages and they will look to make sure that you're breaking into from the first act to the second act on time, and the same thing going from your second act to your third act. So, I was right. As I said, 1 page of a screenplay is approximately 1 minute, and so that's why they're very mindful of how many pages and where those pages stack up. Films can realistically only be so long, unless you're Christopher Nolan or one of those guys. If you go much past 2.5 hours, your audience is not going to be happy with you. And really, you want to stick to 2 hours as your max, because the other parts of the runtime are your credits at the end and stuff like that. But what you're writing in the screenplay should be about 2 hours or 120 pages at the maximum. And TV episodes absolutely can only be so long. And that's where it really comes into play. And you structure the acts around the commercial breaks. Even if it's going to end up on a streaming service, they still people are so used to watching television a certain way with those commercials that if you don't adhere to those act structures, people will notice, and it's not the television and the viewing experience isn't the same whether or not there are actual commercials or not. So nearly all storytelling is aimed at mass consumption, and I'm including novels in here along with that. But for screenplays, they are graded by industry readers, and part of that grade is how well you adhere to the act structures that they want. And those people are called readers, and they provide what they call coverage, which is structured feedback on a screenplay. You can purchase coverage, and I've done that because if you do not have friends who are screenwriters and who are in the business, a lot of people, until they get into it, do not know what kind of notes to give a screenwriter trying to break in, because it is so very different than any other kind of reading experience that they've studied in school or that they get from writing books. So you can purchase coverage, which, like I said, are detailed structured notes, and they do have a pass-fail grade. It's not exactly called that, but they can either say, we would recommend this to somebody, we would consider recommending it, or we are going to pass on it, which pass is actually a bad thing as opposed to a normal pass-fail. But in addition to being able to purchase that coverage if you're outside, if you're submitting to production companies, they use those same readers, and it's usually the actual literal same readers, providing coverage in that way to the executives at those production companies, and those people are recommending that those executives consider or not consider your work. So they are sort of the equivalent of an editorial assistant at a publishing house. They're usually the first readers. They're the ones reading the material that's not from Stephen King. You and me, if we submit something, an editorial assistant, an intern is going to read it, and they are going to recommend to their bosses whether or not they should also read it. So the act structure is a part of how they grade those screenplays. And all of this is to say that when we write novels, we can say, yeah, I know this is a long first act, but there are reasons and it's okay. In a script, generally speaking, you don't want to do that. Even if you want to write a really long first act, get rid of the stuff that is weighing it down, because you won't get past the next level. And so, as I said, film act structure, 120 pages is about the max you want to do. I'm going to go with 120 pages because we're all novelists and we're all going to write long. I have a feeling most of us would not write too short for a film. So Act 1 is about your first 25 pages if you're going with a 120-page screenplay. It's where you introduce your setting and your characters, and you should have your inciting incident as early as possible, and end that first act with your characters getting to a point of no return, which is generally true of novels also, but with screenplays, the whole point of a movie is you are being taken along visually on a journey, and by the end of the first act, the viewer should know why they should continue watching your movie, because people get very invested because it's a lot more of a time commitment in a novel, so they will excuse a long, messy first act because they want to know what happens. People turn off movies and TV all the time. So if you don't have them, it's so much easier to just switch to the next thing, especially because there's way more content out there for visual consumption as opposed. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't a whole lot of books out there, but I think you get what I'm saying. So anyway, so that's the first act. Second act is your longest act, same as in books. That is most of the journey. It takes them from the point where the characters cannot turn back to their normal lives and gets to the climax, and then the climax is the last 25 pages. So that should seem very familiar to those of you who studied the three-act structure and writing novels. If you've read Save the Cat Writes a Novel, or just Save the Cat, or any of the other basic storytelling books, that is your general three-act structure. But like I said, those page counts are pretty close. If your first act is 45 pages, that's a no-go. If it is only 10 pages, you may think about having an extra scene or two, but shorter is going to be better on the first act. Your second and third act, there's a little more wiggle room, because sometimes if it's an action movie, well, yeah, that final action set piece might be really long. I haven't seen the Mission Impossible movie, but I can imagine that final showdown is going to be, and the denouement is going to be a little longer than 25 pages. So there's a little more wiggle room there, but if you do not nail the first act and you do not get out of it quick enough, people are going to stop reading your script and they'll stop watching a movie if it gets produced. So TV structures are, more important, as I said, and we all watch enough television, we probably know this formula. You maybe just haven't seen it written out this way. Your teaser is the very beginning. It's the first few minutes, and usually it's a minute or two. Think of it as a prologue. Sometimes it starts with the main character. Sometimes it's out of context and it's forward in time, and then you go back in time. Not that dissimilar from a prologue in books, so I think about it that way. And then usually after the first few minutes is whenever you have the title card, whenever you get to see what television show this is. Now, if you're experienced and it's a super duper hit show, that teaser before the title card may actually be 5 or 10 minutes. We've all seen network television. If you get to about season 5 or 6 of Castle, and they may have 6 or 7 scenes before you get that stinger and you get to Castle. So, but you are not writing a hit television show because you're in this room with me. So we all need to try to keep that teaser short, a couple of pages, a few minutes. And then, and also, speaking of format, television format, you actually do list out the acts. Act 1, and then you do a page. It would be a page break in Word, but you skip to the next page. Act 2 at the top. So I did not have that in my original breakdown, but again, if you use the software and you set it to hour-long drama, it will prompt you Act 1, Act 2, and like I said, you have all of these acts. The rest of your Act 1 is going to start pages 4 through 10, and you'll have access to this slideshow if for some reason you feel like you need to see it and review it. But as I said, if you Google hour-long TV episode structure, you will get several articles that list within a page or two of these exact numbers. And I know it sounds like a cop-out to say, just Google everything, but when it comes to writing screenplays, it's all out there on the internet. And most of it is actually accurate and true, as opposed to a lot of the crap that's out there about writing novels. So that's another way why those two industries are actually very different. So anyway, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, and it's still, it's a lot like the 3-act structure in that your beginning to hook the reader is short. You need to have a little more breathing room in the middle, and then your climax there at the very end should be pretty quick as well. Half-hour TV episode, which is to say a comedy, and it's you don't really get to do any different than that. If it's an hour-long episode of television, it's called a drama, even if it's funny, and if it's a half-hour, it's called comedy, even if it's dramatic. That's just that's the language, and it makes sense if you think about it. If it's a half-hour, it's going to be a sitcom half the time. It's going to be a Friends. It's going to be a Last Man Standing, whatever it is you watch. And so, like I said, you call it a comedy either way. Now, the way that comedies are delivered, much of comedy is about timing and having quick dialogue and snappy stuff. And also, you in television, especially, you have fewer locations because they have to be done on a much smaller budget than a movie. So, with half hour, a lot of times a page is actually not exactly 1 minute. You can get through one page quicker because you're reading the dialogue more snappy. So even though it's also 5 acts, you actually, as you see, I end on about 33 pages. You generally want to be a little over 30 minutes, even though it's a half hour, including commercial breaks, because of just the way comedies are usually delivered and what's finally produced. And for contests and stuff, which I'll get into briefly in a little bit, sometimes the rules say if you're writing a half-hour comedy pilot, let's say, it must be at least 25 pages, even though if it were sticking to 1 page a minute, 25 would be cutting it pretty close because you have to account for commercial breaks and a half-hour time slot. But they know that you need to go a little longer. Teaser, again, it's about the same no matter what television show you're watching. Act 5 on a sitcom, on a comedy, a lot of times it's called the tag. It's what plays over the credits. Veep is what comes to mind for me on HBO, where they literally split screen. You have that final little scene going on, but over here the credits are rolling. Friends kind of did a very similar thing too. That generally, I have pages 31 through 33. Shorter the better on that, because the credits can roll fast. And generally your tag is wrapping up some little plot line that's just incredibly funny. I'll talk briefly about television versus film in terms of plot lines and subplots. Movies can have essentially one plot and have one or two characters going from A to B very quickly, especially if it is an action thriller or something like that. Television generally has at least 3 plot lines going on, a main plot and the 2 subplots, and they call it the A story, the B story, and the C story. You may have heard that even sometimes depicted in television and movies, because Hollywood loves to do film and television about itself. And it's actually pretty informative. A lot of it is actually, it's satire usually, but it's pretty reflective of how the business actually works in a lot of ways, I'm finding out. But you do want an A story, B story, and C story, and it sounds like, that's, I don't want to think about it necessarily that literally. But we've all seen television, and usually you have an ensemble cast in television because you have a big world. And yeah, usually you cut from a scene, the main thing, you cut to a character who's over here doing their thing, and they have their own family and their own lives. And then you cut to some other character who's just doing something absolutely bananas off the wall, funny, and they have 3 or 4 or 5 scenes throughout the episode of whatever harebrained thing they're trying to do. So that would be more like a C story, and usually that is what would be over the tag, because it's not important in the overall story arc of the season to know what that C story is going on, but it's usually super funny, and there's usually one last laugh that they can get while the credits are rolling. So that's a little bit about the structure of a comedy. I don't write comedies, so that is all stuff that I am doing based off of research. But also, I actually usually prefer to watch and consume comedies than dramatic television. So if you watch a lot of television, a lot of this is going to be very innate whenever you try to write it and you start seeing the television episode play in your head as you're writing. The business. I promised I would get to this. So That quote, "You're going to have a team," is what my manager told me when we met in New York when I was at Thriller Fest, because we were talking. I was talking about the publishing industry, which was why I was in New York, and she just happens to run their New York office, which is to say during COVID she moved home to New York and works out of her house. But so we met up. And you do not have just one agent like you do with books. Generally speaking, you have a literary agent, and that is the one person who does all this stuff for you. However, that is not, you can't function that way in the Hollywood ecosystem. So I've said the word lit manager before. That is what Robin Galloway is to me. She works for Gramercy Park Entertainment. She, in essence, is going to manage that side of my Hollywood career, which is to say all of my screenwriting endeavors as opposed to acting if I pursue that much further. But a literary manager is very analogous to a literary agent, or what they call in Hollywood a book agent, because as I said, literary is kind of the name of a manager too. So the way she described it is the way that sometimes literary agents describe themselves too, is that whenever you have a tragedy in the family, you're not going to call your agent because they're not going to give two hoots, but you're going to call me, and we're both going to be crying at the end of the phone call because that's a very personal relationship. It is probably the most friendly and the closest relationship I will have to anyone in Hollywood. And for those of you who have had book agents, who've had literary agents, that can be the same way. Almost every author I know who has been with a literary agent for a long time, they are very close, and they do know each other very personally. So that's how I think about it. If you know what a literary agent is, you pretty much know what a literary manager is. A Hollywood agent is the person who negotiates your contract. And your literary manager cannot do that, because usually your literary manager is also a dramaturg and knows about storytelling and will help you on your script, much like a book agent would. A Hollywood agent is usually a lawyer who probably went to an Ivy League school or a very good school, because there is just so much more money involved. So they need somebody who's very skilled in contract negotiations to negotiate your contracts. So you put it this way, an ultra-successful book, Gillian Flynn, her books have sold a few million copies over the lifetime so far of the books. Awful TV shows and films can see that in a month at the box office or in the ratings, and sometimes they can get them in a week if there's a huge marketing push, which is to say that everybody makes a lot more money, and the production costs of a film are so much more than a book. A book, just to produce it, let's say you are paying everybody at the publishing house very, very well. Let's say it costs $10,000 to put out an novel, which really it's usually around $5, but let's call it 10. A low-budget movie is $10 million. And there are hundreds of people working on it. And so that is why Hollywood agents are contract lawyers who have relationships with the people in the business, and they can get you work, and especially for actors, they are the primary person who gets them work. But for writers, they're mostly there to make sure that you get all the money you want and that you get all of the credit and all the money for that credit. But going back to your managers, they help develop your scripts, your pitches, and they help manage your career. So you may have heard the term talent manager. And so if a manager, Robin doesn't do this, but let's say she also wanted to help manage my acting career, she could do both, and then she might just be a catch-all talent manager. But they are there to manage your career, which, like I said, is, a lot of good literary agents also are doing that too for your books. But they do help with your scripts, like a literary agent might do for your books. Developing the pitches is one of the main things they do, and I have a whole section on pitching, because that is one of the ways where Hollywood is, like I said, a mirror image almost of books. Your lit manager gets you the opportunities to pitch your work. They have a lot of relationships with executives, and they're going to put you in the room to try to see if what you're working on is right for those people. They also pitch you for writing assignments and staff positions. So in many ways, Hollywood writers are a little more analogous to journalists, and I view it through that lens because that's what I was. But most of them make most of their money from writing for hire. Studio executives, if they like you as a writer, if they enjoy what you've written in the past, or if you just have a great sample, even if they're not going to produce what you're pitching to them, if they like you, your writing style, and they like you, and they think you're going to be somebody who can deliver, which is a big deal because a lot of writers can't write on a deadline. Again, journalism. But your manager might pitch you for a writing assignment. They might say, "Hey, we have a movie that's in trouble, and they need a new draft of the script next week. Can you do it if we give you the previous draft and give you our notes on what we want changed?" And they will hire you to do that. So you're not having to sell a spec script; they are hiring you to write a script. And so that's work for hire. Staff positions. Television shows are written by writers' rooms, and that's one of the contentions that the Writers Guild is on strike about right now. But it used to be, on a major television show, 10 or 15 writers all in a room bouncing ideas off each other. Some people were just story editors and they do any of the writing. They laid out the story and let the other people write. There's a lot of different dynamics in there, and I can get to some of those different positions here in a minute. But your manager will pitch you for that, like, "Hey, I'm trying to sell that movie you wrote, but would you be interested in writing on Taylor Sheridan's next show?" "Yes, ma'am, I would." Yes, that was a literal question that was asked of me, and some writers just like, "No, sell my movie, I'm not interested." But the more interested you are in work for hire, the more money you make, and the more connections and networking you make, which is the name of the game in Hollywood. Literary managers lit managers, they don't actually say literary, lit managers can be producers on your films and your television shows. And so that was explained to me by Robin. She said Gramercy Park Entertainment, her firm, she's a partner in, they do sometimes get attached, which is an actual industry term, they get attached to their clients' projects. And they help find the director for your movie or television show. They may help find an independent financier to help with the studio if the studio doesn't want to foot the whole bill. There's a million ways to skin that cat. That's what a producer does. They get everything put together so that production can be made. So they are legally allowed to be producers, whereas agents are not. So that's one big difference. Your lit managers have smaller client lists because they invest more time and energy into you. They are oftentimes more selective, which was super flattering for me that Robin decided that she wanted to represent me because she has a very small client list. But the point is that it's a much more intimate, professional relationship. And lit manager standard, they earn between 10 to 15% commission on any work that they get you. I put 15 just to give you the not worst case scenario, but the highest amount you might pay. And that's very analogous to, like I said, to a literary agent in the book world. Now, I think I have a slide that says this later, but while it's on my mind, going back to managers being able to be producers. If Gramercy Park Entertainment were to be a producer on the television show that we are working on and we're going to be pitching as soon as we can when the strike is over, they would get their money from that and Robin would waive her 15% commission because, they're not out to scam me. There's plenty of money to go around. So, if she's going to be making money as a producer, she's not also going to take a commission on that same work. Now, agents, I forgot to put that in here. See, there will be mistakes because there will be mistakes. Agents can get you opportunities to pitch. Many of you know Taylor Moore. I referenced him earlier. He has a major book agent who has, a sister agent in Hollywood, and that agent has gotten Taylor meetings with some very major production companies. And they can pitch you. They can try to get you those open writing assignments and work and stuff like that. Their primary thing that they do They're responsible for creating, finalizing, and negotiating your contracts and getting you paid in as many ways as you can. All right, I think I'm going to finish up with this slide and then we'll take a break. But really, just very quickly, most of them have law degrees from prestigious universities. If any of you are familiar with the HBO television show Entourage, Artie Gold, played by Jeremy Piven, he was an acting agent, but representative of most agents in general. He had a JD from Harvard. That's pretty standard for those guys. Agents cannot be producers legally. I don't know exactly why. I did not do that research. I just know that that's a difference between a manager and an agent. Agents have huge client lists because they are all about the money. Maybe not personally, but professionally. That is their entire game, is making money for other people and making money for their firms. And they get a 10% commission. And they can afford to do that because they have the huge client lists. And I don't imagine an agent under any circumstance would ever waive their commission. And so giving up 25%, but to boil this slide down, is the money is worked in. All the producers and the people putting the bills know that everybody's giving up a quarter to their representation, so that's factored in. Whenever we come back, I'll go over the different ways a writer can get credit and get extra paychecks other than just for writing a script. But why don't we all get some snacks, use the restroom, and we'll come back, finish this up, and then I'll take questions.
I'm glad to hear that.
Everybody can make their way back to their seats. I will work against my nature and try to get this wrapped up.
Want to get it right.
Okay, so picking up where I left off, a brief rundown of the various ways a writer can draw a paycheck from the Hollywood system, and somewhat the major independents. The film that I'll be acting in, which I'm not going to go into a ton because we're writers and I don't know enough about the acting thing to be much of the recording. But for the Hollywood system, there are a lot of different ways where you can make money, especially if you are breaking in and not already a well-established writer, because that's the if you're not being staffed on the writing show or doing a lot of the open writing assignments, which you're not in the beginning because nobody knows who you are. But if you do sell a script, be it a film or a TV show, there are different ways you can get paid, and more in television. So your team should be trying to get you as many checks as possible because that also means more money for them, depending. But so I will use my own stuff as an example. So the television pilot, which is an original pilot, not based on any of my existing intellectual property. Let's say I sell it. So I'm not a showrunner. I don't know how to run a show. I also do not know what it's like to be in a writer's room. I know what it's like to sit at my computer for hours and hours on end by myself. That's my writing life and writing experience for the most part. However, if we sell my pilot script, I will be a creator. I'll be a show's creator. So there's money to be made there. I will almost automatically be a producer because if you create something, you're also inevitably probably going to help produce. Or my firm might be the producer, so I may not get that, but I would fight to get that kind of credit. Story editor is another position you can have in a television room, which is to say, if I wanted to gain experience in a writer's room, but not have to worry about carrying the load of writing in a new environment I'm not familiar with, I could be a story editor, which means that I help guide where the story goes because I created the characters and I already know where I want the story to go. I have a lot of that planned out. So that's another title I can have, and another piece of the paycheck I can have. You can be a consultant. So I think we all know Jody Thompson here, and most of us know that Netflix is, or it was before the strike, adapting and filming and shooting a TV series based on her Rain and some Canyon series. So in addition to selling her intellectual property for whatever money that is, she also is going to get a consulting fee for every episode, so that they can call her up and say, ask questions about location details. How would somebody say this? We're going to deviate from your book, but if we're going to do this, what's the most authentic way to do this? You get the idea of what a consultant would be on something like that. So she's getting paid, low five figures per episode, 10 or 13 episodes. So, that's six figures just, for her to answer the phone every once in a while. And so, that's a lot of people call that mailbox money. She's just going to get a check, probably digitally, not literally in your mailbox, but you never know, once a month or however it works out, just, for being a consultant on the show. And so that's something I might do. And actually, my manager said, I'm probably, once stuff gets going again, going to pitch you as a consultant for, Western type of shows, specifically Taylor Sheridan type stuff, because he's going to be filming literally where I grew up. So I could be considered an authority figure, and I could, be a consultant on that stuff. I'm not saying that's going to happen as an outside shot, but as she was explaining to me the different things she was going to do for me while she was pitching me to be a client of hers, that's one of the things she says. I will definitely try to get that to happen, and it makes a lot of logical sense, but she'll have to get into it after the show. So there are diverse ways where you can draw and make more money from that Hollywood system, even as somebody who is not yet proven. And the more of that stuff you can do and you're willing to do, because that was the question: are you willing to do this thing if I pitch you to these people as being a consultant, writing in a writer's room? And I was, obviously, those of you who know me know I raised my hand and said I'll do all of it until I don't have any more hours in the day. And but the more of that you do, the more people you meet, and in the show business, knowing people and those networking is huge. It's big in books too, but as I'll get into here in a minute, it's not as critical in Hollywood. It is the game. Meeting people and networking is how it all works. So how do you get your representation? I recommend starting with finding a manager, not just because it's the way I did it, but because, as I said, that's the most intimate professional relationship you'll have, with the entertainment business. And they know all the other players, so they can be the person who puts the rest of your team together. So how do you find a manager? You can query just like you would a literary agent, but it's, obviously I'll email. I mean, I don't think anybody gets snail mail anymore in any of the various entertainment industries, but emails are much more casual. And this is opposed to querying a literary agent. They will have, I want these 5 words in the subject line, has to follow this format and all that stuff. Querying a literary manager might be new exciting TV pilot, dash your name, and then you write as though you were writing sort of a business casual email. If it sounds too stuffy, they might think that you're crazy or that it's a bot, to be real honest, because that's just the vibe. We all make fun of the fruit and nuts out in California, but I mean, that's just the vibe they have, and that's how they interact on a daily basis. So, they say that the goal, and it's true definitely with Robin, is to, make it sound like you're already in the business and you're already their friend and you're just having a conversation with a peer, even if you are brand new and have not broken into the business. In that email, and most managers don't have a web page like a literary agent where it says, like I said, put these 5 things in your email or I'm not even going to look at it. They don't have that, but they all are going to want your log line, which we'll go over that in a minute on a specific project. They're also going to want your comparable titles, which we'll go over. And also important is a why you paragraph, which should only include any major accolades that are somewhat related. I would probably maybe put one of my literary awards in there, like if I had done it this way as opposed to how I did it, which I'll explain. But I wouldn't list all of my awards and all of my nominations because they don't care, and that's just the truth. And they don't have a lot of time because, as I said, they go through a lot more stuff on a daily basis. And the why you paragraph is not necessarily about professional accomplishments as much as it is about what about you makes you the best person to tell this story, to write this script, which is why my original pilot is set here, and it's about stuff that I know about personally that I'm delivering onto the screen. And for most people in Hollywood, most directors, actors, everybody, that is very important. Is how is what you've experienced in your personal life? How can you use that for this specific kind of art? Whereas if you write well and you're a smart fella and you like reading mysteries, you can be like me and write your own thrillers and mysteries and do a ton of research. One of my most commercially successful books right now is an action thriller with spies and military guys, and I have done none of those things. But I know people who have done a lot of research, and so that's totally fine for a novel. If I wanted to make that a television series, it probably wouldn't go because there are plenty of former agency and tier 1 military operatives out there who do this and who are consultants on these shows and who do write these scripts. So I would have a hard time getting into that because those people, Hollywood wants the people who live that stuff. So I'm writing about neo-Western stuff as Taylor Moore did with his books. It's the same concept of Taylor, and you're familiar with his series. But that's very important. So the why you paragraph is not your bio from Amazon. It is, what about me and my personal life makes me the best person to tell this story. And at the bottom, you can pay to play, but legitimately. So we all know that there are scams in the book world, and there's a cottage industry around ripping off people chasing that dream of being an author. And a big part of my day job is warning people against that. Because, we don't scam people, but we do offer services. It's, it takes up a lot of space in my brain, as you can tell. But in Hollywood, there are ways and there are services that a lot of people pay for, even people who are established writers. They pay for coverage, as I said earlier, to get good feedback on their scripts because it is such a very stylized and formulaic thing that people can take courses and become certified to be professional script readers. And speaking of classes, you can take a lot of those because there aren't a lot of people out there giving presentations like this because generally you move out to Hollywood, you get to know writers and they teach you, or you can get these virtual classes, and you can enter contests, and it's a little different than book awards. We all know we've all probably submitted our stuff to book awards, either independently published or we've worked with our publishers to get those submitted for nominal fees, which is about what these things are. But contests are things that people in the industry do pay attention to if you are shortlisted, if you're semifinalist or a finalist for the major contests, and those generally $50 to $100 to enter, and it's all for unproduced stuff, as opposed to book awards, which your books generally have to be published. There are a few manuscript contests out there, so if you have entered like a Writers League of Texas manuscript contest or some of those other manuscript contests, it's very similar to that. But industry people do pay attention to those, to the major ones, and there are services I'll go over at the end that sort of are a clearinghouse for the legitimate ones that people do pay attention to. And sometimes the awards come with meetings with top executives, and most of them have cash awards at the end. So if you really think you have an amazing script, you might spend $100 and you may make $10,000, and at the top level. So you can pay to play to get breaking in, and you can do it legitimately. And I am, proof of that because I met Robin, my manager, by taking a class with her through a service called Stage 32. I took it to gain a new skill, pitching, which I'm about to go over, pitching to Hollywood, because I knew it was very different in the book world and I needed to have that skill set. But I also knew that she was a literary manager who could make things happen for me if I impressed the shit out of her. So I impressed the shit out of her, and so now I have a literary manager. So, a lot of people say, oh, you you paid to get representation. I paid for the class, but I took that opportunity and I networked, got to know her, and did a damn fine job. And so now, hopefully once the strike is over, I'm gonna start taking meetings and all that good stuff. So if you do have a few $100 that you can spend on some of this stuff, and you do a lot of research and you're careful with it, you can gain opportunities that way. That is not at all the case, so far as I know, in the book world. That is one very way that those two industries are different. If you're paying anybody in the book world, unless you're independently publishing, and they're not editing your manuscript and they're not doing, that kind of stuff, that's probably not good. You should never pay a manager to read your book manuscript. That's not how it works. But in Hollywood, sometimes you pay somebody $100 to read your stuff, and if one of those readers that you paid for really, really likes your script, and they also double, this is their side gig, their main job is reading scripts at a major production house. If they read an incredible script, they're going to pass it on to their bosses. They're not going to say, oh, he paid me to do that, I cannot. That's not how it works in Hollywood. But that is how it works in the book world, and I know because that's how it works in my world. You pay me, I don't publish your book because you paid me, and there's a clear wall there. It's not that way in Hollywood, for better or for worse. I'm mostly just passing along the information and letting you know that sometimes if you pay for something, good things can happen, but do it with somebody who can do something for you. I chose to take that class. There are several of them out there like it. I chose somebody who was a literary manager because I knew that's what I needed to get my career going. So, I paid for the opportunity to get me and my work in front of somebody who mattered, and that led to good things. If I had chosen somebody who could do nothing for me, well then I knew all I was going to get was the class. But I paid for the opportunity to impress someone who mattered, and sometimes that's the way it works. So, your new manager will help develop your projects, as I said, and help find a home. And then once a studio says, hey, we want to make this television show, then she and also the executives, will help you get the agent. Because if you have an offer in hand, and this happens sometimes in the book world too, if all you need is an agent to get a show greenlit, somebody's going to find you an agent. You'll get to choose. They'll give you a list probably, but that is not the hardest part. So that's my recommended way, is to get a manager and start doing it that way. But the whole point of this whole presentation really is Hollywood exists on the western edge of our country, and it is also the wild, wild west when it comes to entertainment stuff. If you've got a kick-ass script, if you get anybody to read it who's in the business, there's a chance it can get made. We've all read that story, it definitely can really happen that way because they are always starved for good content out there, because we all know we've seen terrible movies and terrible TV shows, and that stuff gets made, but nobody wants to make that. So if you have written something incredible, if you find somebody in the business to read it, people are going to work to try to get it on the screen. So don't think of the way that I laid out as a formula. Think of it as one way to do it that makes sense for somebody who started out in the novel writing world, because the whole goal of this is try to make, sort of translate those two worlds. Because there's not a ton of overlap, believe it or not, in terms of working writers who do both. So pitching. I like to think of these two businesses, books and show business, as an hourglass. At the fulcrum there in the middle is character, because both types of storytelling need incredible characters, and there is no getting around that. But the top half is Hollywood. And up at the top, the big wide thing that you're going to talk about first is your world. You want a big world with a rich cast, an interesting, awesome setting, and a strong plot and a hook, which we would call high concept in the book world. Everything in Hollywood has to be high concept. There are no character studies. Now, you can tell a story that is a character study, but if there is no high concept hook, people are probably not going to read your script and they're not going to produce it. And people won't watch it because reading a novel about incredibly interesting characters with rich inner lives is very different than watching any film or TV show, because you just don't get that. You don't get that in your dialogue. Even the voiceover, it's still not the same. But we all know it's opposite for books and book queries. You start out with the character, and then you tease the rest of the world and get them to want to read more, get them to want to read more. That's how a query letter works, and that's how a synopsis works, and so we're all familiar with that. The point of the visual was that Hollywood couldn't be more opposite. Whenever I was working on my pitch with Robin during our class, I started out like I would a book, started out with character, and the character's interesting, and it was Zoom, so I could see her. And I got to the bottom talking about, all the interesting setting, the history, and all the different characters. Then her ears perked up, and she started saying like, "Oh wow, holy crap!" Just making comments. And then first thing she said was, "I want everything at the bottom. I want all that up top. Get me interested, and then eventually you're going to talk to me about your characters." Which my brain kind of short-circuited and like, wait, what? I'm not starting out talking about my main character? They don't even want the main character's name or occupation until halfway through the pitch. Not even kidding. And Hollywood pitches are oral. You do not send in a ton of emails. You might get one to get your manager, as I said before, but if you want to get something made, you go to an executive's office or you do it by Zoom, and you pitch it just like I'm standing in front of you pitching that I know what the hell I'm talking about. It's all oral. And so if the studio is like the publisher, in the book world, your agent takes what you use to get them to be your agent, repackages it, and then sends all that literature off to a publisher and waits 5 or 6 months on submission to see if they like it or not. In Hollywood, you and your representation go in virtually or in person, and you describe and you pitch your idea to them, and a lot of times you get a thumbs up or thumbs down or a let's continue the conversation in the room. And that is how it works, and you do not send emails. You send emails to set up the meeting, but you have the meeting. And yes, you are the one who does it. It is not, I'm not going to say, okay, Robin, go pitch my stuff. No, I have to do it. She'll be there for support, and she may, if I forget something, she may interject, and she may talk some of the detailed stuff that I don't know about because I'm brand new, but I'm the one pitching. And so super duper introverts, that's going to be tough, right? And one of the reasons why Robin, I think, vibed with me and clicked with me is that despite the fact that I identify as an introvert, it appears that I'm actually an extrovert and pretty good at this kind of stuff. And so most of the writers she deals with are introverts, like most writers are. And the fact that I was good at other practice pitches, and I do get up and speak in front of people, and I am on panels, and I'm comfortable in a room discussing topics with folks. That was a really big thing, and so that is very important in this world. I feel like it's important to be upfront with you that if you write a kick-ass screenplay, you're going to have to learn or be comfortable for very brief periods of time discussing it and pitching it live to folks. Most of us will probably be doing it over the computer, which is easier. But if you start doing a lot of work, you're probably going to have to start taking live meetings. Like I said, I asked, and that's just how it works. An executive is not going to buy anything that they don't hear coming from your mouth. I promise you talk about log lines. Most of us are familiar with what it is. One sentence, two if it's a television show with a whole lot of stuff going on. 25 words is a good average, but just short and concise. Does not have to be flashy in terms of your word choice, but it has to deliver a few things very well. You have to know who the protagonist is. No names unless it's a biopic, and even then has to be someone pretty darn famous, has to be a household name. What is the conflict and what is at stake? And they have to feel like there is large scope. It cannot be something a short, something that might be a commercial or a short film or a music video and you're trying to make it into a feature. There has to be, something, a really big, high concept thing going on. Because it's all visual, so there has to be some pretty big, incredible visuals that they're going to have to be able to see when you're talking about. So here's some long-line examples, and this is going to be a game. Call it out once you know what it is. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. Godfather. I see why you think Succession. But yes, that is the Godfather. And I have highlighted, the character. Who's the protagonist? The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty. Now we would be able to say Don Corleone, people would understand. But at the time, that's what it was. And I've also bolded things that, the terms that give it that scope and that weight I was talking about. Organized crime dynasty, clandestine empire. That's stuff that you say it and it's, it hooks you. Second one, a young man is transported to the past where he must reunite his parents before he and his future cease to exist. Okay, that one's a lot easier. So what's the conflict? He's transported to the past. It can be that simple. That is the main conflict of the entire thing. Somebody is put back in the 50s. And bolded, he and his future cease to exist. Okay, yeah, that's worth considering, right? That has weight. To catch a killer who skins his victims, a young FBI cadet must seek help from an incarcerated and manipulative cannibal. That's the lens. So what are the stakes? To catch a killer who skins his victims. With thrillers, sometimes that's all the stakes need to be, to catch his unbearable monster, and the things they're bolded, skins his victims, manipulative cannibal. Yeah, that's a visual, That's stuff that gets your attention. One more? Or no? All right, now, so TV is a little different. There are a couple more added elements because it is television and not, enclosed, closed-loop story, even if it's a franchise film. Episode length, so hour-long drama or half-hour comedy. And sometimes you want to put the genre in there, and genre does not mean the same thing as it does in books. Sometimes it does, but there are different rules that you can look up and get a feel for, but in the end, it's mostly a feel thing, not a set list. There's no Amazon listing for television, necessarily. So, a few of them. An hour-long supernatural mystery centered on the disappearance of a young boy, forcing his police chief mother and his friends to confront terrifying forces to rescue him.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, absolutely. And see, these are longer than the film ones because, a television show has to have a lot going on. Has to have a large cast, has to have A, B, and C storylines. And you have to try to encapsulate at least some of that in your log line. Next one. A sitcom that revolves around the everyday lives, loves, and losses of a close-knit group of 20-somethings who hang out at a Manhattan coffee house. Friends. There you go. And you look at these now and be like, well, that's a really bland way to describe Friends. But if it's brand new, if you're just trying to get somebody interested and to hear more, then yeah, that works for a comedy. And here's another one. An hour-long Western procedural about a private investigator caught in the middle of a generations-old blood feud despite being outcast of his oil tycoon family. Trick question, that's mine. That is the log line for the original pilot that I wrote, that Robin and I are working on. But you see how it follows the same style, the same formula, the same, almost even the same rhythm. As writers, we can appreciate that. And we can appreciate this next slide too. It took us more than a month to get that sentence exactly where we wanted it, with all the different things going on. So these log lines and these consonants pitches can take as long, or in my case, longer than writing the actual pilot or the actual feature. But it is that important. So comparable titles. These are just like they are in books, and the formula is you say think this meets that, and then it's good to include a but so you can differentiate it because as in the book world in Hollywood, they want the same but different. They want something that is recognizable but fresh. In other words, they want something derivative, which I know we hate to say, but that's just the business. So this is mine. Think Bloodline meets Dallas, but set in West Texas. And so you say those things. If you're familiar with Bloodline, I don't think it's super niche, but Hollywood executives would know what Bloodline is. It's popular enough. So, but Bloodline gives the procedural element I was talking about. Dallas gives the family soap opera drama set in Texas, and then Bloodline's just in West Texas and not in the metropolitan city of Dallas.
I think I've heard this called a mashup.
Yeah, and that's another way to do it. There's a lot of different terms for the different things, and you hear it, you roll with it, and you figure it out. And like I said, it's not as rigid as in the book world where things have, everybody speaks the exact same language. But yeah, that's the mashup. It's the X meets Y. It's the comparable titles. Some old school people call it a nutshell. for whatever reason, but the nutshell is his bloodline meets Alex. And so you want the log line and those two, and that usually gets people, they can kind of see what you're talking about, and then you keep going on. A pitch deck is another important part of a pitch. It is not a slide deck, which is what this is. It's up on the screen. That's what I thought at first. You are not giving a PowerPoint presentation, which is absolutely what I thought an in-person pitch would be. It is not. A deck is, a normal document, and it is a written, flashy-looking version of the oral pitch you're going to give for them to take with them. They're going to listen to your pitch. They're going to have that, and they may look at it while you're pitching, but in theory, they're going to be paying attention to you because you are charming and charismatic and telling them about the best story that's ever been written, right? And you want to have that confidence. But they have that to take with them. And for television, they call it a series Bible a lot of times, and it can be 30, 40 pages because you're going to go through the entire series. You might go through 4 seasons if you haven't planned out that far. So for television, it's a lot longer, and they can call that a series Bible, but it's the same thing as a deck. And remember the hourglass. You need the pitch deck and your oral pitch. You're starting with the big world. And actually, pro tip, start out at the very beginning with your why me paragraph, that I mentioned earlier in the query. You start out, I should write this show because my parents dealt with this and I learned about it, and also I write mysteries fairly well based on my past record. And then it's the log line, then it's the X meets Y, and then I start talking about, the big, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in the Texas Panhandle. And then about halfway through, you learn who the main character is. So finally, I want to wrap up. A lot of us in here are much more interested in just getting our previously published books and written stuff adapted, right? We all want to be Jody Thomas. We all want to have 60 books in print, make a lot of money from that, and then have Netflix come call, right? So the question I have, if you want to get your stuff adapted, are you already published, or do you have a major book deal? If you do, your agent is going to do all that stuff for you. That's what happened with Taylor. Before his first book was even printed, his agent was already working the Hollywood side, got in touch with the sister agent, and they've been working on that ever since. So that's just, that's how that works. You aren't super involved as the author. No agent in your publishing contract with an independent press. Make sure you either have your film and TV subsidiary rights free and clear, or like me, you have the ability to negotiate for them. My contract, with one of my publishers, I have them free and clear. In the other publishing contract, if I end up selling them, I just owe them a 10% commission because they own the IP, which is not amazing, but I also don't have an agent, so circumstances are what they are. But I have the ability to sell and to negotiate for my film and TV rights. If you do not see that in your contract, clarify, ask for it, because otherwise your publisher may or may not ever, work on your behalf to get your stuff adapted. Do not have either of those things. You're asking your publisher to work on your behalf, or just, sell tens of thousands of copies of your book. Easy enough, right? But that's how it works. That's how Hollywood comes to call them. And if you're Jody, I don't know what her agent may or may not have ever been doing for adaptations, but eventually she reached a tipping point where her books are so damn popular that Hollywood can no longer ignore. And she also has IP that was right for the market because Virgin River really opened up that space and was super duper popular. So what does Hollywood do? I want something that's the same but different. I want the next Virgin River that happens to be Jody's Ransom Canyon series. And Netflix has literally said that exact thing. Like, it's not a secret. We wanted the next Virgin River, and this book series was it. And it also has sold a bajillion copies. I'm making that number up. Are you not yet published? So the first question I have for you, is your end game to have a film or TV show? If whenever you say, why are you writing this book? If you say, well, I want a Netflix series. If you jump straight to that, then the next question, okay, are you finished writing your book? If you are finished writing your book, while you are trying to sell your book, because if you've written a book, you should try to sell it because that's a lot of work, and we all probably would like to get paid for our efforts in some way or another. Write your script, write your adaptation while you're trying to sell your book. because you're going to want to distract yourself while you're trying to sell your book, because that is a soul-sucking endeavor, and we all know it. And if you don't know it, you will find out once you try to sell your book. So, if you are not yet published and you do not have your book finished, and you want your end game is a Netflix streaming series or a film, stop writing your book, because that takes way too damn long. Start writing your screenplay, because Hollywood does want intellectual property, and they say it all the time. But why do they love IP? For the large built-in audience like Jodie Thomas, like Taylor Moore. They want guaranteed tens of thousands of people to watch that premiere and to go to that film because they love the book so much and they love those characters so much. If you are not even done writing your book, you have none of that, and Hollywood does not care. But as I found out through my manager, did not know this before, my pilot that I have written, or if I wrote a movie script, can be sold as intellectual property in the very same as a book. So I can sell that pilot, and if I didn't want to be any more involved, which is not the case, but let's say I didn't want to be any more involved, Gramercy Park can sell my pilot to Netflix, and Netflix could own the rights to the character names and the basic plot line, yada, 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 and they could completely throw my thing in the trash and hire someone to completely write a brand new thing, but they would get to use my character names and all that stuff, just like someone who buys a book. Somebody comes in and writes the adaptation, usually screws it all to hell because, the book is always better than the movie. But that's how it works. So they could buy my pilot the same as they would buy my book, and the process would be very similar. So that's food for thought. If you want something in media, you do not have to take the time to write a whole ass novel. You can write a pilot and sell that and get the same end game in much quicker time, and without as much financial investment probably too. Now, if you get the attention of a lit manager, they can help you adapt your books, which is what Robin is doing for me. My books and my short stories, including ones for the High Plains Writers Anthology, which if any of those get made into movies, I imagine that our profits from anthology sales will raise. But they can help you adapt your stuff, and they can help sell that to get it adapted. That is a part of it. So if you have Hollywood representation, they can help anything you've already published get adapted the same as an agent would. And these are resources with links and websites. Katie, our technology chair, has it, and it'll be available probably on her website. Christine can probably send out a PDF in the newsletter, although I don't actually know how attachments and all that stuff works later, right? So I'm not going to promise anything, but you should be able to have access to these links, but they're pretty, and again, if you just Google, how do I write a screenplay, you're going to come up with a bunch of screencraft links. Classes on writing screenplays, stage 32 is going to come up. Intro screenplay contest, Coverfly is going to come up. They're really big websites that are very popular and used by those in the industry, even those who have been produced and who have been in the business for a while. They still utilize this kind of stuff. So these ones, I have vetted, they are not scams if they are asking you to pay for stuff. As I said, stage 32 is where I took the class that led to me getting my literary manager. So, and that is it for the presentation. I appreciate you putting up with me talking for 15 hours at you, and now let's all go have dinner. But now is the Q&A portion. Some of you probably have specific questions, and I will be happy to answer them as much as I can. What I will not be able to do is answer specific questions about the movie. I will be asking because I've signed a non-disclosure agreement, and that is a big deal in Hollywood. As opposed really to the book world, you probably will never have to sign a non-disclosure ever, because once the ink is dry on a contract, you're usually free to talk about whatever you want, but not the same for films. So with that caveat, does anybody have anything they want to ask? Gentleman in the back.
Yeah, Rick.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not Rick,
Sorry. I'm just curious, is there much of an actual difference in 3-act structure and 5-act structure, or is it more just kind of preference of the writer deciding, I kind of want these certain beats isolated? Because it seems like it's kind of beginning, middle, and end, just a preference on where that division happens?
So if you're talking about what I laid out for the television, that is for commercial breaks. That is literally the construct that they use. In terms of storytelling, yes, it's a beginning, in the middle, and an end. But also for television, you have the very distinct, recognizable stories, A, B, and C generally. And so a lot of times there's so much jumping back and forth that the 3-act structure that you use for a novel or a film does not necessarily apply. You have to switch between scenes and different storylines. And honestly, we all watch enough television that if we sat down to write an episode of television, as I did, it comes pretty naturally if you just think about the rhythm and the flow of an episode of television. If you don't watch a lot of television, my question would be why you're trying to write an episode of television. But yeah, that it's storytelling doesn't change, but specifically the 5-act structure for television is something that I would encourage you to read more on using the links and Google. But it's a lot of a field thing. Now, if you're talking about, I've heard of the 5-act structure for novels and for films. So for that, generally speaking, that's just how do you want to break down your second act. Like me, mine's more of a 4-act structure, and a lot of places are, where there's Act 2, Part A, Act 2, Part B.
I use the same one.
So yeah, like that doesn't change. It's just, all of Act 2, no matter how you parse it up, should fit within that that larger middle section in terms of the page count structure that I was talking to you about. But in the end, storytelling is storytelling. Tell a really good story, keep all that stuff in mind, and you're well on your way. Rick?
How different is the structure that you gave us from, say, like the Hallmark formula, very successful?
So the structure versus formula debate. So that comes down to genre, which is analogous to books. So I write thrillers and sort of mysteries, although I don't adhere strictly to it. But then some of you in here write romances, and those genres and books have tropes and have reader expectations that if you miss the mark, you are going to upset people. And so if you're talking about the formula of a Hallmark movie, it's the same thing. If you do not hit the right beats and you do not hit them at the right time in the right way, viewers won't be happy, but more importantly, your stuff's not going to be made. Or if somebody does buy it, they're going to bring in somebody to rewrite your script to hit those beats. Or producers are going to get involved somewhere in the process and make sure that it fits that formula. So in terms of the structure, that's one thing, and that's important, the page counts. In terms of the formula for super genre movies and television shows like a Hallmark movie, one thing about filmmaking and television is that there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. There's a show called Project Greenlights on HBO. There's old with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and then there's new that just came out with some newer folks. And it really shows you a pretty good look at the process, and the producers who are footing the bill, they get involved to make sure that you do not piss off your audience, and you have to get approval by the studio. You can have the whole thing filmed, and if the studio says people are going to hate this and we're not going to make money, they'll get rid of it. Batgirl happened with HBO. So my advice is to not fight it too hard. Do write the story you want to write, but if your goal is get it produced in Hollywood or a major independent, they will not let it go if it's going to break all the rules and they don't think it's going to make money. Now, does that make for some formulaic, bland, crappy stuff? It sure does. And the bottom line is, if you're doing this, if you're writing screenplays and you want to get stuff done in Hollywood, as a writer, you're doing it because you make a lot more money than you do writing books. Now, if you're a director, that's a different story, because a director is a lot more like a novelist. They absolutely control as much as they can. They have a vision. They think of themselves a lot of times as auteurs, as us novelists do a lot of the time. And so they have a very different perspective. They're doing it. They make a lot of money. But a lot of times more important is their style and the points they're trying to make. You think of the most famous directors, That's what they did. Your Kubricks, your maybe or maybe not Spielberg, depending. But a lot of those guys. But here's the thing: you know their names, just like you know novelist names. How many screenwriters' names do you know? Taylor Sheridan. Well, that's also because he created all this stuff and he writes about our area. But there are 70,000 working writers on strike right now for the Writers Guild-ish, and you don't know hardly any of their names because they're doing it because it is, a good way to make a living writing words. And I don't want to disillusion anyone. If you want to do this thing that I'm trying to do and the stuff I've been talking about, you want to do it because you want to get paid and you're going to have to make compromises. And even Taylor, talking about books, being with a Big Five publisher, he gave a lecture that a lot of you probably listened to. And he said, yeah, I'm a cog in a big machine, and I make compromises on my story. I rewrote my manuscript to fit what was going to sell. And this is that, but to a bigger degree. And I know that does not at all feed the artistic soul in all of us. And I don't like relaying that message, but I want to be honest with you guys, and that's one of the reasons why I even explored the Hollywood stuff was because I wanted to see if there was a way to make a little more money putting words on the page. And we'll see if that bears fruit or not. Yeah?
What screenwriting software do you use?
I use Final Draft, which is probably the more expensive one. It's the Cadillac of screenwriting software. It is what is the most standard in the industry, I would say, in film. For television, it's not, I don't think it's as prestigious in the television world. Matter of fact, other ones may even be recommended if you specifically want to write television. But we're novelists in here, so I think most of us films is going to be what we're drawn to, or serialized television and limited series, which I didn't get into because I don't know enough about those, because my manager said unless you are a household name like a David E. Kelly, maybe not household, unless you're a huge name, huge producer, huge showrunner, no one's buying your limited series. So get well established, and then let's circle back to your limited series was the feedback I got.
Final Draft does go on sale though, a couple of times.
And that's what I was going to say. Sign up for the newsletter if you're interested in screenwriting softwares. That's what I did. Final Draft. I signed up for the newsletter, and they'll spam you and blah, blah, blah. But then every once in a while, you get an email that says, this week only, 70% off. That's when you buy it. And that's what I did. And at that point, it's a couple $100. But if you pay for Word, which a lot of us do to write our books, you're paying, Microsoft that same amount of money. You're doing it, in smaller monthly installments instead of a one-time. So.
And if you've got student ID, you can usually get it for $79 instead of $279.
Yeah. But yeah, I recommend the software because if nothing else, you can do free trials, first of all. Learn how the software works and where it looks and what it looks like. And then at this point, I can actually kind of recreate it in Word. I kind of know where the margins are within, a couple tenths of an inch. And it looks like a screenplay. And sometimes that's more important because mostly it's going to be PDF anyway. So if it looks right, then it's pretty much fine. But what the software does is, like I said, if you hit enter and you probably want to go to a character, it's automatically there. And if you type in the first letter and you've used that character before, it'll autofill and you can click. You hit enter again, and it thinks you probably want to write dialogue for that character. So it automatically sets that up. And like I said, you don't even have to press shift to capitalize letters. Hit period, hit space, the next character is going to be a capital. It's meant for people who are just doing this for, just banging it out. So I recommend getting the software, but a lot of them do have free trials. So if you just want to learn how it feels to write a screenplay and what the software does, the free trials are a good option. And you can get them on several different ones, figure out which software you like best. Because all our brains are wired differently, so one might work better for you than the other. Good question. Anyone else? All right, well, I appreciate your time, and I know that this was very different from what we usually do with the High Plains Riders, but hopefully you learned something, and if nothing else, hopefully it was a break from somebody telling you, even though I said it, to show don't tell, and all the other stuff that we always hear when we get together and talk about writing books. So thank you, and if you have any questions, let me know.